So perfectly working markets don't necessarily give you the right thing. You don't just distribute wealth if you don't like the way markets work. That's not the way the power system works. Disparate time horizons, delays in recognizing limits to growth, so that by the time you recognize the problem, it's either impossible or very expensive to prevent it. Inappropriate production and consumption patterns. On the previous slide, Galbraith said, you know, supply and demand are not independent. There's producer-created demand. Now, I would say if you want to go away from the talk believing anything, you should believe the following. The private sector should not be allowed to produce anything it wants. I'll say it again. The private sector should not be allowed to produce anything it wants, because what they are taking us down is a garden path of disaster, as was indicated in the prior talk. The failure to engage individuals in the society to realize their human potential, which results not only in economic disparities, but social exclusion of whole groups, is a major problem. I'll reference immigration. I'll reference Sarkozy's deportation of the Roma. I mean, this problem is not a small problem. The anti-immigrant animus that exists in the United States, forgetting that it was a country built on immigrants. And one which I didn't add until 5 years ago, corruption, the abuse of market power, and inadequate law. I mean, if you don't take care of those problems, and by corruption, I don't mean just the hand in the till. I mean the corruption of the social contract. Government has a role. And I have to tell you, I'm a Rawlsian, that is, I believe the things that governments should do is to advantage the least advantaged, not trickle down. I can tell you, I believe in trickle down. When I take my dog out in the morning and it lifts its leg against a tree, that's trickle down. But trickle down economics does not, has not, and will not work. If you don't take care of the bottom billion in the world, you are going to have to either put iron gates around your houses, or you're going to have guns, which are pretty damn strong. Now, the issue of environment, economy, and work are all related. And the things that drive these corners of the triangle and the relationships between them are both technological change, where you can get some win-win situations, but also globalization. Now, globalization has its pluses, has its minuses. But if we don't begin to build institutions that handle what we innovate and how we arrange, you know, the political spectrum, then we're not going to be able, we're going to have trading off one against the other. For example, right now in the US, have a terrific jobs problem. Obama's under enormous pressure to do something, which he hasn't done yet, about the jobs. You can lay tar down to fix the potholes in the streets. That creates quite an environmental footprint. So is the choice between just creating more stuff in order to get people with purchasing power elevated, with the consequence that you're going to have an environmental problem, or shall we go green and don't believe for a moment that in the aggregate the green jobs are going to outweigh the brown jobs? Because every chance that industry has to technologically modernize, they shed labor. Unless you move to a product service system, unless you start paying people not to make a Nintendo game, but to teach your kid Chinese. That is, if you pay people to perform services which are not capital intensive and energy intensive, then you have an enormous multiplier effect. The problem is General Motors doesn't own Chinese teachers, and they're not interested in promoting them. You know, the problem is we deal with stuff. Now, work is important not only in the economic sense, it creates purchasing power, but it provides a means of engagement in the society. You cannot leave the bulk of people without using their human capital. If 30% of our industrial plant was dormant because we couldn't sell the stuff, you would say, what a tragedy, what a waste of capital. And we're content to waste 70% of human capital, which is renewable. I mean, the reasons are simple. We don't sell human capital in the market. But you have to find a mechanism for elevating the role of labor. And I'm not talking about physical labor. I'm talking about the so-called knowledge-based work. I mean, any of you who make an airline reservation or try to get your computer fixed, you talk to somebody, it takes you hours and hours and hours to get the information you want. The price of services have been all externalized onto the consumer. We could pay human beings to give us intelligent answers to the questions which these guys from India and from China do not give us, okay? You have to integrate labor policy with industrial policy, with trade policy, or it's not going to work, right? So here's the, and this is the last slide, here's the triangle. What does it involve? Well, we have these pollution problems, as I've indicated to you. They're connected to industrial production through three different pathways. Industrialization, the second, the role of investment, the third, trade and environment. They have differential effects on the environment. We also change the way we make things and where we make them. So the international division of labor and the nature, the changing nature of employment, what people do, affect all of those characteristics of work, which are really the only way to engage people in the society. Large amount of people who are not employed is not a sustainable society. The issue of having to do more in the labor area suggests that unless you change the way we make our changes, you are just basically going to increase the environmental footprint. And as I said, it turns out that every chance industry has to modernize and to shed labor, they will. The green jobs don't outweigh the brown jobs. It's wishful thinking that you're going to have either from global warming or from toxic pollution, any of that change. So let me stop here and just say that I think innovation is key, labor is key, markets are key in terms of control. You need to have a legal system which is enforced, a government that is dedicated, and those are the necessary and sufficient conditions. Technological fixes are not enough, incentives are not enough if you can't get the people who are stopping you out of the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ashford. In fact, we had made a discussion with Professor Ashford before we started the panel that in his case 10 minutes means 15 minutes. So I will do my best because my turn is coming to see if it is truly possible to have the panel only for 10 minutes. I will try to see what the outcome will be. And in fact, I understand that I come from another world in this kind of discussion because as you have realized, I am a lawyer and in fact an administrative. And what my friend Emilios Avouleas suggested to me to talk about is to say a few words about global administrative law. It is a neologism. About 10 years ago, two professors of New York University, I believe they are the fathers of the neologism, Richard Stewart and Benedict Kingsbury. They always write together. Very seldom they write separately. They started the project, and they started a project which they called Global Administrative Law. And the area where they centered their research was mainly, or they started from there, international environmental law and national environmental law. And they started trying to find common ground for a global perception of administrative law. All the merit for this new area of research belongs to them, although very important scientists, administrative lawyers, political scientists from all over the world now are working very often with them or sometimes parallel to them in the field which remains a little bit vague at the moment of global administrative law. I need to say that when I was a student in the Faculty of Law of the University of Athens, And when I continued my studies in administrative law, it was unthinkable that we would one day have a global perception of administrative law, because administrative law is the most provincial, or used to be, the most provincial branch of law. It serves the national power of each state. And it was very difficult to export it to others. And I remember that when I was a student in Paris in the 70s, my professor, Jean Rivaud was his name, was teaching comparative administrative law, which was an innovation for those days. And that teaching was not followed by any French student. His students were only Colombian, mainly, or Latin American, and Greeks. But everything has its explanation, and everything comes gradually. Administrative law was at the beginning conceived as the heart of public law. And the distinction between public law and private law started in modern times during the times of absolutism, before 1789, the French Revolution. In those days, lawyers helped the kings of those days to create a powerful mechanism that was the administration, public administration. And in order for this administration to be powerful, public law was needed, in the sense that the possibility of the state to impose its will on the citizens with having no need of any other help, for example, by the judge, this idea was developed and was the basis of the beginning of modern states. In 1789, the French Revolution took this idea that there is an administrative law as a branch of public law, and they took this idea and they continued this idea because it was useful to them. They had made the revolution, and they wanted this revolution to work, and they needed public law to make the revolution stand and develop. In 1873, this principle, the principle that administrative law is public law and only public law, was taken into a famous decision, the decision Blanco of the Supreme Court of France. By 1921, it was understood in France, in Germany, everywhere, that despite this heritage, public administration was not always working under public law. That public administration could also work under private law. And this, again, was decided in another famous case, I don't need to tell names, of 1921 of the Supreme French Court. So, all of a sudden, we know since 1921 that public administration may work under public law, but public administration may also work under private law.